Good evening, Chair. Calls to order public hearing for Bill 22-006, zoning code cidery. Mr. Wagner.
Bill 22-006, actually, the inception of it came up during what we were doing is the study on the breweries to try to decide what constraints would be most appropriate and how to adjust it so the breweries were compatible with ag zone land. And it came to me then from some people that were interested in doing a cidery in Harford County. And all this bill does is actually define cidery. If you want, I'll read it. Cidery is a facility that produces hard cider, alcoholic drinks made by fermenting the juice of fruit on the premises and which possesses the appropriate license from the state of Maryland. The facility may produce, bottle, contract, store, and enter into temporary delivery agreements with distributors. Products may be produced on-site and sold for on-premises or off-premises consumption in accordance with the limits of the appropriate license from the state of Maryland and the Harford County Liquor Control Board. The facility may also include site tours and product testing. That's one of the major differences between breweries and cideries, and the fact that the oversight comes from the state. They fall under the Liquor Control Board, and what this does is add that definition into our zoning code, and it also provides a chart that provides for where the principal permitted uses are, which would be in B2, B3, CI, and GI districts, which would be most appropriate, and it does not go to the ag zone whatsoever. Well, by special exception, you can get very close to it, but that's only for services and supplies. So it sticks with B2, B3, CI, and GI. And this would at least allow for the possibility of cideries to locate in and around Harford County, because there seems to be a little bit of a desire by some to implement that.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Council, anyone else with any comments or questions?
Council President.
Mr. Johnson.
Councilman Wagner, in this legislation, should we have something that determines the hours of operation for something like this?
Yeah, you could certainly, put an amendment together for that. It's in more of a commercial use. I mean, we can look at that and see if it requires an amendment, if you want.
Thank you very much, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. Anyone else? Ms. Dixon, do we have anyone signed up for the public?
There is no one signed up, Mr. President.
All right, with no one signed up, I want to thank the councilmen for their input, and this will conclude the public hearing for Bill 22-006, and we will look at it at a later date. Thank you. We'll take a short recess and start at 7:30. Chair calls to order legislative session day 22-014. Please join us in standing for the pledge, followed by the opening prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather in these chambers this evening. We ask you to guide us through this council meeting, remind us of our responsibility, be thoughtful in our decisions, and ensure we do our due diligence each and every day. Lord, we ask you to continue to watch over the people of Ukraine, wrap your loving and healing arms around those who have been displaced, the injured, those who have lost loved ones, and most of all the children as they represent the future. Father, we thank you for the many blessings. Be with us. Let your grace and peace be upon us. We ask these things and more in your most holy and sacred name. Amen. Amen. Agenda item number 5. Consideration of petitions, applications, appointments, and nominations. Executive appointment, Historic Preservation Commission. Mr. Schroeds.
Council President, I make a motion to approve the county executive's appointments of Christina Presberry and Eric Polk to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. It's been moved and seconded to approve the reappointments of Christina Presberry and Eric Polk. Is there any discussion? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
There being 7 votes in the affirmative and 0 in the negative, the appointments are hereby approved. Ms. Presberry, Mr. Polk, are you in the audience?
There you go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item number 6, special presentations. Harford County Public Schools, mental health date. Council, at this time, I'd like to have Mr. Hennigan and Ms. Alton come forward. Good evening, and thank you for making time to come talk with us this evening. As you know, a lot of interest in what you have to bring us. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. So good evening, President Vincenti, esteemed council members. My name is Bernard Hennigan. I'm the Executive Director of Student Support Services with Harford County Public Schools. And I'm here tonight with Ms. Christina Alton, our mental health specialist with the school system. We appreciate the opportunity to come here tonight to discuss the topic of mental health. As you'll recall, my department was here last June to discuss the way we're addressing mental health concerns with our students post-pandemic. We come here tonight with a different perspective on the topic. Tonight will help you, the audience, and the community members at home gain a better understanding of the issues children face when it comes to their mental health and the signs and symptoms we all should be looking for that may be a cause for concern. We're also going to share some current data with regards to our students in Harford County Public Schools and some of the important partnerships we have in our community that are helping us address the needs of our students. So when we look at mental health, really the first step is to look at what is typical adolescent development versus a cause for concern. We've all gone through adolescence and maybe had children or grandchildren of our own and seen that when you're going through adolescence, there's going to be change in emotions, change in our physical appearance, change in our thought process. So how do we know as parents or as community members or as friends or as staff members when this change is typical versus a cause for concern? And then the next level is, when do I look at this is a cause for concern versus maybe that's something a diagnosable mental illness? In order to do that, we have to have a firm understanding of what a mental illness is. A mental illness is a diagnosable illness that affects a person's thinking, emotional state, and behavior. It disrupts a person's ability to do their everyday activities, work or attend school, carry out your daily activities, or engage in satisfying relationships. In essence, is this something that is impacting me on a regular basis and getting in the way of me doing the things that I like to do or should be doing? When we look at our youth, we understand that mental health problems are common. Mental health problems are developing in adolescence. When we look at statistics around mental health, even as adults, we see there's a greater prevalence of those symptoms beginning during adolescence. And that youth and young adults may experience these problems differently than adults. So for instance, a 14-year-old struggling with depression may look very different than a 55-year-old struggling with depression. And the important thing that we realize in the school system and the community is that early intervention is the key. We cannot let these things linger and go unattended. As we've learned through our adverse childhood experiences training, is that these mental health conditions will then lead to physical health conditions in adulthood. And that's really been breakthrough research that's been done over the last few years.
Thank you for having us here this evening. And this is, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so this is an extremely important issue, and I'm happy to be here this month especially to talk about it. If we know that mental health issues are a problem and they're common and they develop during adolescence, adolescents don't often get treatment until they're well into adulthood. So it's sometimes difficult to determine, though, because, as Mr. Hennigan said, adolescence is fraught with so many changes. So how do we know when a young person could be struggling with a mental health issue? Or are we seeing behaviors that are ones that we would typically expect? And we need to be detectives for our children. When we're considering the existence of a mental health issue, we need to think of the individual alone and not compare them to anybody else. What's typical for them? What are you observing that may be interfering with their daily activities? School attendance, socializing with friends, even being with family. Do those things last longer than a few weeks with no relief? Have you checked in with the school? Are they noticing similar things about the child that you're thinking about? Are other family members noticing those issues? As we said, adolescence is a turbulent time. Any of you who have adolescents know them, have experienced them. So many changes, physically, emotionally, behaviorally, even in their thoughts. In the next few slides, we'll talk about some of those specific areas where we might indicate a cause for concern. For example, if we think of physical changes, sometimes adolescents need to be reminded about hygiene, but maybe it's an issue when they don't ever want to shower, wear the same clothes, don't wash their clothes, then maybe we're concerned about them. They're sleeping more or less than they usually do, up all night and sleeping during the day. Many of the emotional and behavioral presentations that you see on this next slide are certainly typical of children and adolescents. However, if we think about a depressed mood or anxiety, maybe a depressed mood that doesn't go away, it lasts for a sustained period of time, or a young person is so anxious that they can't get out of bed to go to school, those are all reasons to have concerns and maybe check in. Again, you're being a detective. Behaviorally, it's so typical for adolescents to separate from their families, meaning they'd much rather be with friends than they want to be with us. We all expect that. But it's when they don't even want to be with their friends that we might be concerned. Also, adolescents, they like to try new activities. So maybe they give up soccer to start playing basketball. Again, it would be when they give up soccer and don't replace it with anything, begin to hang out alone, not want to be with friends. Those are all times when we might be thinking there's a problem. Even in their thinking, if you know adolescents, you might often think, wow, I don't know what that kid is thinking. But if we think about excessive pessimism, nothing's going to go right, why should I even try? Believing that people only see the negative things about them. And thoughts that are of significant concern would be any that involve death or suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people. It's very serious. And it brings me to my next slide. Harford County Public Schools maintains an electronic database of suicidal ideation reports. We call it SIR for short. Suicidal ideation reports are the result of a student making a statement indicating self-harm. Our school-based staff will meet with a student, that might be a psychologist, a social worker, one of our school counselors, and make an assessment to determine next steps. Whenever a SIR report is generated, parents and guardians are notified. A few things about the slide that we're presenting tonight. The 826 number doesn't indicate individual students. It's the number of reports, meaning that some students could have multiple reports. That's not unusual. Through our investigations, because we do investigate every report, we often find that students make impulsive comments, and they don't necessarily mean what they've said. And in fact, they're sometimes surprised when we investigate. And in those cases, we work with students on replacement language. What words can you say when you're frustrated or angry or upset? But there definitely are situations that are more serious, and staff members then work with families to make recommendations and connect them with resources. But we utilize this SIR data to help us target interventions, looking at trends, whether it be in individual schools across the county, in certain age groups, male versus female. It informs our professional development for staff, as well as our interventions with students.
If I could add to that.
Yes.
I think it's imperative to note on this slide, that when we look at those numbers, and Ms. Alton alluded to this, but it's something that really needs to be clarified. This is any ideation, any student who might fail a test and make a comment. about, I want to die because I failed the test. And then when the counselor comes to meet with them, they say, oh, I didn't really mean that. It could be anything from that to a student who's actually had an attempt. We've had some discussion about this in the community over this past year, and some people interpreting these numbers as these are numbers of students who've attempted. This is a full spectrum, and in fact, most of these are at the other end of the spectrum of students who've said something off the cuff, impulsive, and then when discussed with it, did not really mean it, and that's vetted through this survey report process. It's also worth mentioning, we've seen a lot of data and heard a lot of conversations about the impact of the pandemic, but if you will look at our numbers from 2019, 2020, pre-pandemic, so we stopped taking data in March because our students went home during that time, and then you look at this year, 21, 22, we're really on par, so it has not gotten worse. It has pretty much leveled out. And 2021 is just a year that we weren't able to capture data because students were in and out of school not regularly. So I just want to point that out because it's important to look at that data and say we have not seen a major influx post-pandemic. In fact, it's almost right on par with the data that we had the year prior to the pandemic.
Just like we use our SIR data to inform our interventions with students, we also began this year inviting HCPS students at the beginning of the school year to complete a needs assessment to better inform individual schools and our district as to where we might target our intervention efforts. I want to say our amazing school counselors have been doing a version of this for many, many years. We simply formalized it this year. There's an elementary school version and then a secondary version. And in this slide, we share just some of the data that we gleaned. It was a little surprising, if you'll note that more than half of our elementary schools reported that students talked about test anxiety being a big concern. So those are our youngest students. One of their biggest concerns was test anxiety. But almost a quarter of our elementary schools reported anxiety as one of their top reported concerns. 16% of our middle and high schools reported anxiety as a frequently selected concern. But 60% of our middle schools had students indicating feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And as somebody who was school-based not that long ago, I saw that every day in the middle school where I worked. It would be tempting to draw some conclusions from our experience with the pandemic and our needs assessment data, but this is the first year that we've formalized this. So I would want to wait and see how that bears out as we complete this in the future. We're tweaking it a little bit for next school year, but no matter what, we'll continue to use the data to inform our practice and our intervention with students.
I would add to that to also say that this is voluntary, so no student is forced to take this needs assessment, and we do not ask about mental health diagnoses. We ask more about how they're feeling, what are their relationships with their peers, relationships with teachers. What we're really excited about is we believe that come the fall that we're going to have instant data. So a school, I'll just pick Jarrodsville Elementary School, could do the needs assessment with their students. Everybody who voluntarily takes it completes it, and immediately they have their data and have pie charts and say, hey, why do our third graders have this going on? School-wide, we see this is going on. And then they can meet with their school performance teams to address that. So when you see test anxiety in elementary schools, some of our principals who had that as a number one concern said, okay, what are we going to do now? We need to make sure that we're working with our students before a test, give them some calming strategies, give them some strategies that they can employ so that they don't feel that anxiety. What we don't know also is this is a year where we were doing testing, state testing in the fall, which we haven't done ever before. So we don't know if this response from students was due to that state testing or the general quizzes they may get from a teacher. So again, as Ms. Altena pointed out, this is something we'll be tracking as we move into the fall. But that instantaneous data is going to be an enormous asset to our schools' teams that can take that data and begin to address it. So last June, we had mentioned the statistic, and I think it's imperative that we revisit it, that students are only spending 1/5 of their week during the school year in our buildings, and they only spend 1/8 of their year in our school buildings. So 7/8 of the student's time, so I take my daughter, 7/8 of her year is not in a school building. It's at home with me or out in the neighborhood or wherever she may be. So we, as a school system, only see our children 1/8 of the year. So as a result, it's really imperative that we do presentations like this so we can involve the community, we can involve parents, because I would bet that if you ask most people what percentage of a year their child is in school, they would think it's much more than 1/8. But when you do the math, and you think about summer, weekends, breaks, nights, we're only seeing them 6.5 hours a day, 180 days a year. So we are grateful to the support we've had from the county council to have the staff to support our students when they're with us. But we know when they walk out that door at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, whatever time it might be, that those supports in the community need to be there for them as well. For that reason, I wanted to highlight a few of our partnerships we have here in the county. Again, a debt of gratitude to you all because you support many of these programs directly or indirectly. And I'm going to allude to some of these in our next slides. So school-based mental health is a program that we are really proud of. This is not something that exists in every school district, and I would say to the extent we have it, not in many school districts at all. We have an outside therapy agency in every one of our school buildings except for John Archer, and that is just because of the specific needs of those students. So students who are unable to get their therapy after the school day, we have therapists coming into the building, they're referred, the parents meet with a therapist just as they would in an outside agency outside the school day, and then that child receives their therapy during the school day. So the therapist will alter it so they're not missing the same class every week or every other week, how often, depending on how often they're meeting. This is a huge resource for our families because many of our families cannot get their child to therapy at night or after the school day. So being able to see their therapist during the school day really helps because they're already in with us. Also, these agencies have worked with us to continue on in the summer when needed so that the child could come back to the neighborhood school to see their therapist. We have over 500 students countywide accessing the service, and the goal obviously is to work with the therapist to the point you don't need it anymore and then take on new patients. So this again is something we're very proud of and have been able to employ into every building. The Handle with Care program is again another program we work with all the police precincts in the county. So when the police encounter a child at an event where there was trauma, it could be that someone in the home passed away. It could be something more traumatic that the child may have witnessed. The police contacts us. They just give us the child's name, date of birth, and school. They do not tell us what happens. It's none of our business what happened. It's not our business to judge what happened. We just know that we're going to tell the school when this child comes in tomorrow morning, handle them with care. And our school staff have been trained to realize that and to understand this child might come in tired. They might not have their homework with them. They may be hungry. But again, we also really train our staff not to stigmatize the situation. Don't assume something negative happened. Again, it could have been a very, very elderly grandparent that may have passed away. Nobody did anything wrong, but it was traumatic for the child. The great piece of this is that our schools then begin to develop a sort of general empathy and understanding what our students go through in the 70s of the time they're not with us, so that when they come into our building, we need to step back and take a different perspective. And most of our teachers are already doing that, but this is just a visual reminder to them to keep that in mind as the children walk in the door. This is an event that's coming up that I hope some of you will be able to join on May 13th. It's a family wellness night, and I know that the slide is, you can't really see all the different organizations on there, but this is really a culmination of a lot of the organizations here in Harford County coming together to do a wellness night for our families, and I'm going to let Ms. Alton expound on that a bit.
This is really the ultimate collaboration. The hosts of the event are the Office on Mental Health, Klein Family Harford Crisis Center, and the Health Department, supported by Ashley Treatment, Maryland Coalition of Families, and Harford County Government, as well as the school system. And it's really one of the first opportunities that we've had since the pandemic to share the wonderful resources that we have as far as mental health and physical wellness are concerned in our county. We're so looking forward to this. It really kind of started as a small idea. Do you think we could do something at Ripken Stadium? And And then we all made it happen. And it happened in a very short period of time. So we do hope that many of you can join us at least for a part of the meeting or the event. If you have children or grandchildren, the movie is supposed to be excellent. I have not seen it, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. Learn about our resources in this county that we hope to share with all of our citizens in the community. Mr. Hennigan talks about resources within our county, but we also have to know when someone needs a resource. And so within the school system, we provide some targeted trainings that are evidence-based, nationally and internationally recognized. 3 that we offer with frequency to our staff members as well as our students are youth mental health first aid and mental health first aid. And those 2 classes really teach participants to recognize when an individual may be struggling with a mental health or a substance use disorder, how to approach them, and to know about resources unique to the community so that you can help them access those resources. They're long classes, but very popular within the school system, particularly, obviously, youth mental health first aid, because it really focuses on youth ages 12 to 18. Our staff members really enjoy this training because they are always looking for ways to better support our students and educate themselves. We also teach Question, Persuade, Refer, QPR, which is a much shorter class and focused solely on suicide prevention, recognizing behaviors through clues and observation. Again, knowing how to approach someone, asking them the suicide question, directing them to resources, and persuading them to utilize those resources. We've taught that class is appropriate for, or that training is appropriate for folks as young as 12. So we've taught our students about knowing the signs and also going to adults, because we think that our children, if they were worried about a friend, would tell an adult, but they don't. That's a myth. And what we're encouraging them to do is treat any one of these trainings as emergency care that you would offer as if it were a physical health issue. They're meant to do that so that you can provide emergency care to someone who is struggling with a mental health issue and hand off to a professional who can help them more. Again, very powerful trainings, very popular and sought after by our staff.
And I would add to that that one of the trends that we're seeing that's a positive trend, not just because of QPR, but just because of the trainings we've done, because of the fact that mental health is being talked about at venues like this, because people are starting to see that we can reduce that stigma and that I really should talk about my mental health the same way I talk about my physical health. Students are seeing things on social media and reporting it. And for years, working in the school system in another county and seeing that, someone would post something on social media and a friend wouldn't say anything because it was 2 in the morning and they weren't supposed to be on their phone. What we're seeing now is students immediately seeing that and going and telling an adult that somebody posted this, we've got to do something about it, and lives have been saved because of it. So I think, again, that sort of speaks to this QPR training, but it also speaks to the more we talk about mental health, the more our community and especially our children will see that it's something very normal to talk about.
So we're coming to the end of our training this evening, and so folks in the audience and you all and those watching may be wondering what they can do. And I think, as Mr. Hennigan said, the more we talk about mental health, so when you all invite us to come and talk to you, and we have the audience, we have our community who's listening, it reduces stigma. It makes people more comfortable talking about a pretty uncomfortable subject. It's education for our community. You get to know your role better, how you might be able to approach someone, knowing when you're looking at a student or a child who may be struggling, learning about resources. I can say that we need to listen to our children. As adults, we tend to want to solve problems rather than actually just sit and listen to them and offer advice. And oftentimes that's not what they want. They just want us to hear them. And our advice and how we would have handled it when we were kids is so very different from their lives. We really can't imagine what it's like to live today. And intervening early. What we know is that the earlier we intervene, the more likely we'll have a positive outcome. And that's true of physical health problems as well as mental health problems. So those are some things that we all can do to reduce stigma and make mental health as important as physical health. Additionally, what do our children need? All the things that we all need to be healthy. We need to exercise. They need to exercise. Get good sleep. Have healthy and nutritious eating habits so that they can grow their brains and their bodies. Predictability as much as we possibly can. School is a predictable place. Our kids are used to that. It's hard because life is chaotic. As little negative stress as possible, and a word about that, because stress, most people think it's all negative, but it's important. Our life, we don't have a life that's without stress. Toxic stress that goes on in our children's lives has a great impact on them, so if we can limit that. They shouldn't have no stress, because then they don't develop coping skills, and that's not very helpful either. But also what children need, and what I know the children of Harford County have, is caring adults. And it really only takes one in the lives of our children to make a difference for them. And our children are very fortunate because they have many adults who care for them.
And I think this is a really important slide, because oftentimes when we talk about mental health, we go to the end of the spectrum of response: therapy, medication, things of that nature, when really we really need to dial back and look at these 5 things. You know, I'm the father of 3 daughters. Are all 5 of these things happening every day in my house? No. But if one of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them are not happening every day, something could look like a mental health concern. If I have a child that's getting 4 hours of sleep a night, not eating well, not exercising, she may not look well, and she may be exhibiting behaviors that may be concerning of a mental health issue. So I think at the very beginning, we need to, as a community and as parents, look and make sure we're at least taking care of these 5 things to the best of our ability. I know that 9 to 10 hours is hard sometimes, but our children really need that. I remember my daughters yelling at me to go to bed when it was still light out. I'm like, well, I want your brain to grow. So I think these things need to take place, and I'll really focus on that middle one of sleep with cell phones. And if we are not monitoring cell phone use, many of our students are up till 3 in the morning on their phones, and then they get up for school at 5:30, and then we wonder why they're tired during the school day and not looking well. So it's an important piece. It's hard to do. Parenting is, I'm sure you all know, is the hardest job out there. But we don't want to jump to response at one end of the spectrum if we're not at least checking in and making sure these 5 things are in check most of the time. Again, it's not going to happen every day.
Finally, another word about resources. We are very fortunate in this county to have many resources and emergency resources. The Klein Family Crisis Center, that's open every day from 9 till 9. You're guaranteed to meet with a mental health professional if you walk in there. I know that you all are aware of this resource. We also have our mobile crisis team who will actually come to someone who is in need and in distress with a mental health crisis, another amazing resource that we have. We have 211 where folks can access a variety of resources, including mental health treatment, but there are also national resources, and one that I like in particular for our students, they are digital natives. They know more about the internet and technology than we probably could ever hope to. An amazing resource for them is our crisis text line, where you only have to type in hello to this number and someone will be on the other end speaking to you via text and supporting you. And the existence of this, the use of it has absolutely exploded. This is the way young people communicate. My daughter tells me all the time, Mom, please don't call me. Nobody talks on the phone anymore. Please just text. So I learned. But they're utilizing this resource. But if someone is in extreme distress, they can also bring the police to their home. And I had a parent who told me the police showed up at her door one day. She had no idea that her daughter was communicating on this resource and didn't know that that problem was in her home until the police showed up. And it was brave of her to share that, but she was so grateful when she knew that she needed to get help for her daughter. I'm certain that's not the way she wanted to find out, but I'm so happy it was available to her.
Yeah, with that, thank you very much for having us, and we'll open the floor if there's any questions from any of the council members.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hennigan, for that presentation, and Ms. Alton. Ms. Alton, as a mental health services specialist, are you alone in that position with Harford County Public Schools?
So I am the only mental health specialist, yes, but of course we have many practitioners that are school-based. I coordinate our school-based mental health services, interact with all of the resources in the community, make connections, and consult with school-based staff about students and services. So yes, I am the only mental health specialist, but there are many, many student services staff members.
Okay, because it concerns me. I mean, almost 38,000 students, and that's why I was asking that, number one. Number two, I really appreciate you coming here today and giving this presentation to us. And I wonder how often you're able to come to a venue like this and present to the parents, because for the past 2 years, we've had parents come to us on a regular basis and want us to interact with them with these issues. But obviously, we're not the experts. You are. So how often are you out or available for Harford County parents to be able to hear this presentation or to interact with you or engage with you in reference to their children?
Sure. So we are actually speaking this Thursday to the Special Education Citizen Advisory Council. It's a bit of an expanded presentation from this. We also do presentations at our board meetings. But I will say one of our plans pre-pandemic, which we want to start to institute now that we can start doing the face-to-face meetings again, is doing that youth mental health first aid training. But the first time I did that, I was blown away, because really that period of adolescence, you go, and we've all been through it, you go through so many changes, and when you look at your child and say, is this a problem or is this normal? You know, she's crying because her sweatpants don't feel right. Is that normal, or is that an issue? So, you know, those types of things, and it really helps drill down, puts the parents through activities of looking at what is typical and what is not. So one of the things that we're looking to do is expand our youth mental health first aid trainings to the community, and also our QPR trainings to the community as well. So that's just something we haven't been able to do for the last 2 years due to the conditions, but it's something we plan to expand.
Thank you. Council, any of you have questions? Mr. Giordano?
So, good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I saw the numbers that you said for 19, 20, 21, 2022 were all the same for the amount of students, the total reports. What was 18 and 19? Did you say that was the same?
No, so our SIR data, that actual database went live in 1920. Prior to that, we do have data. I shared more recent data. We do have data. That's also when we were paper and pen doing our reports, and one of our wonderful administrative assistants worked on the database. So now this is live data for us. The reports come in on a daily basis. Our supervisor of school counseling reviews them. So we do have that data. I just didn't include it in this. And it wouldn't probably be the same, but might be similar.
So, no idea if it's 300, 400, 500?
In 1819?
Yeah.
So I do not have that number. I will say that it has increasingly grown over the years, and part of that is twofold. One, I think there's more mental health concerns, but part of it is the education and the stigma. So students now know, if I'm not feeling well, I need to go tell somebody. So the data in one, and this may not sound right, but in one perspective is a good thing, because students are going to get help. But on the other hand, obviously we'd like it to be zero. So I can send the council our data, I believe, for the last 10 years, and you will see it definitely has grown over the years. But the purpose of this slide is twofold. One, to just show what the numbers are in the last 3 years, but two is to say that we really have not seen a big shift after not necessarily after the pandemic, but in 21, 22, it's really leveled off from the year before the pandemic.
And can you explain the increase in December, March, and February? Is it Christmas and the winter months? Is that pretty much?
Yeah, it could be multifaceted. We definitely do see an uptick in the spring, and there's a lot of research behind that, and it's sort of parallel research to antidepressants, that sometimes students feel so low, and then when they get a boost, then they feel good enough to do something about it, which is sad to say. But so in April and spring, we actually do, students sort of have a little bit more energy, but they've come from so low where they had complete inaction to now feeling like they can do something about it.
And what age group does this represent?
That's across all of
Across the
our
board.
students.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's out of approximately 38,000.
Anything to do with COVID and they still had to wear the masks?
No, and that's sort of why when you see there's been a leveling out in 21, 22, we don't really see an impact at all. So the 1920 school year, there was no masks. And in 21, 22, there was masks until a month or two ago, and it's almost exact data.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Wagner.
Mr. Hennigan, certainly we appreciate, well, both of you, for sure, the work that you do within the school system, and we've had conversations several times and many times about substance abuse and addictions and so forth, and, mental health takes on a huge gamut of things, from everything from emotions to, physical to you name it. It's all encompassing. And I guess, knowing that this was coming up tonight, I gave some thought to what mental health in the schools looks like and what you're talking about. And we visited the schools in the past and have seen some things there that are quite telling of where we are in the year 2022. My question would be, and you may not be able to answer this, but at least it's something to ponder a bit. I know there's some curriculums that have been pushed out, especially in the health curriculum, that, if you think about the children, they're pretty diverse to start with, and then you have this age range that you have. Would there be a chance, or could there be a chance that some of the curriculums that are being pushed out and maybe presented in a way that you might not want them presented, but could they also do more harm than good? Basically, in terms of precipitating more confusion, more anxiety, more stress. I'm just trying to get to a place where, because it is so encompassing, not all students are created equal. So you could have or would have some that are going to read it a different way or take it a different way, or, you get into some things that they may not be comfortable with or be confused about. And I'm just thinking maybe something that is within the curriculums could cause problems to some of those students. Does that make any sense to you at all, or hit home at all?
It makes sense in that I understand what the link that you're asking if is there. To my knowledge, we've never had a student report that their mental health is a direct impact of
But they
something they
would.
learned.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
they couldn't tell you on a good day exactly where it is coming from, because you said earlier in your presentation, it's years later before somebody, probably after going through therapy, says, oh, that's what caused my issues when I was 12.
Yeah, and I would say that really has me circle back to this point that, we really do need the parents and the community to be involved, because they are with the children 7/8 of the time. So,
But that works only if there's a lot of transparency between what the school is putting into the classrooms and the children, and involving the parents as well, right? I mean, that's that connection.
yeah, and I can only speak personally as a parent that I have felt that the schools that my children have gone through and the curriculum has been very transparent. I would also say, to your point about the substance abuse, I'm very happy that you brought the clubhouse to us a few months back, because that is going to be up and running, and we're having a kickoff this summer with the clubhouse with Aberdeen. So we were going to be housing them, as you may remember, and didn't need to because they were able to get their own location. So the blueprint is asking us not to just focus on mental health, but behavioral health. So that's going to be bringing in, with Ms. Alton's position, really a focus on that substance use as well, because you make a really good point. A lot of our substance use is a direct link back to things that children have experienced in their lives. So there's a lot of trauma children are going through, which then could be, not always, a direct result as to why substances entered into their life. So it is important that we get involved early, that we have the early intervention, and again, to your point, trying to figure out exactly what is it making you feel this way. Because that's the power of therapy. Most of us walk around with thoughts in our mind, and we can't really place why we feel the way we feel. And when you go to therapy and you're able to just verbalize it, that's when you start to be able to point your finger on something and say, okay, this is why I'm feeling this way. So I would hope that if we have children experiencing that, and if they're getting the professional help that they need, that's going to come out in that process.
And I appreciate our education system here being so welcoming, open arms for the clubhouse concept, and trying to get help for those students. And, we won't take it up this evening, but certainly in the future, I would like for us to dive a little bit deeper into some of the curriculum that's in the schools, if we could, because we read a lot about things that are out there, we hear a lot about it from parents, and I think it's imperative. We're in a funny position here. All we can do is give you the money, assume that you're going to move forward and do the right thing with it, and then we hear things that come back sometimes that are like, that's not what we were, So I would like to at least request at some point we come back and have a little bit more discussion in terms of some other things in the schools that we all know that are there and are, the factual things. I'd appreciate that.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I think it's part of our obligation to educate the community on all aspects of our business, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Sir, can you find a seat, please? I'm sorry. Thank you. If you need to get up again, you can, but you're supposed to be sitting. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Wagner? I'm sorry, Mr. Beulah.
I think there's a big difference.
Yes, yes.
And that's the same.
Thank you, Mr. Hennigan and Ms. Ohm. Appreciate you coming out tonight in your presentation. Couple of requests first. These numbers just show, if somebody said, like you said, they failed on a test. What I would like to see is, shall we say, the serious numbers, if you don't mind, for as far back as you can go, where there was actually an attempt or it was serious. And, maybe for the last 7-10 years, if you can go back that far.
Yes, we have the data disaggregated by the severity, what was the reason that brought it to the professional, whether it's the counselor, the administrator, psychologist, whomever, if there was a plan, what that plan was. So we have all that data disaggregated, and it would not be personally identifiable data, so we could share
Right.
that with you.
I don't just, if you can give me those raw numbers, these were the numbers of serious attempts, or where, maybe they were serious, but there was some intervention, just that, if you could, please.
We definitely can do that.
And also, you mentioned a survey that you were giving out to students. Would it be, I'm not asking for any names, would it be possible for us to actually see that survey?
The survey or the responses?
The survey.
Yes.
Yes, I'd just like to see the survey. Sure, if you can give me a general response, or that would be great too.
Yeah, so, and I think Ms. Alton touched on this, but it's important to point out, school counselors have been doing needs assessments. This is my 24th year in the school system, every year. So that's the only way they know how to run groups. What students have a common theme, and then we run group therapy based on that common theme. So what we did with this is really nothing new other than saying, let's formalize it and make a set of questions that everybody's going to get, so we can cover all the bases. This information about individual students was not shared with anybody. The school counselors have that, but it's not really, it wasn't about identifying specific students. It was about identifying data across the school itself and across the school system, so that a school could respond and say, I'll just give an example, 35% of our students report that they're stressed and overwhelmed. Okay, we know that. What do we do about it? So I definitely can share that. Again, there's 2 surveys, one for elementary, one for secondary. I can share that with the council as well.
Okay. And another question, how are you as far as resources? Because I know the last time we met with you guys, you were really only had about 25% of the resources that you need. Has that improved, or?
Well, I would just, I don't know if need is the correct word. So part of our discussion last time was about the ratios that are set, national standards. So for instance, a 1 to 500 ratio for this profession, a 1 to 250 for that profession. So we always could use more hands, but I would say that we definitely are doing a wonderful job with the psychologists, nurses, counselors, social workers, pupil personnel workers that we have now. And as we pointed out during our last presentation, it's not just them. It starts with the bus driver, the cafeteria worker, the front office clerical, and every teacher that develops a relationship with students. So I would say I don't feel as though we're behind, but I would also say we could always use more help.
Okay. One final question, and I'm going to be a little more specific than Councilman Wagner was, and I know it's probably too early, but some of the curriculum, and I'm going to specifically refer to the sexual orientation, sex education, especially in our adolescents, our kindergartens, is there any plan to, because I know it's too early, you don't have any data how this might affect them at this phase in their life, but do you have any plans to kind of look at this and see the effects that it may have on some children?
Yeah, well, I think, and when you...
Is there anything that you already have?
Well, I think when you say early, we don't even know what's going to be taught yet. So we definitely don't have a response to it because we don't even know what's going to be explicitly included in that. So I think as we look at what's going to be changing and what we're mandated to change, then that's something we're going to have to look at and see, is there any impact? But at this point, I know there's been a lot of discussion of people thinking what we're going to be teaching, but that has not been fleshed out yet.
Okay. I just would like to kind of, if you could, if it comes across your mind, kind of keep me up to date on that, or the council.
Yeah, and I would say that my office works very closely in concert with our health curriculum office, and because a lot of our work is braided and crosses over, so that's definitely some work that we can do.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Buell. Mr. Wagner? Or Chad? I thought you just stuck your hand out again. Go ahead.
To his point, could you provide us with what is called the basic framework from the state for mental health sexual studies?
I don't know that, but I can look at it.
You can't, if you don't have that, I'll send it to you.
Please do.
Please, I'd like to get a copy of that from the state if we could.
Sure, if it exists, yeah, that's not something I've worked with, so.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schroeder?
Yes,
Excuse me just a minute. Mr. Schroeder?
yes, I remember a few years ago, I think there was $1 million added to the budget for psychologists and social workers and counselors. I'm not sure what the combination was, can't really recall specifically. But where have we gone since then? I think back then it was to deal with the mental illness we're talking about, but then a lot of it had to do with the addiction problems our community was experiencing. And now, of course, since then, we haven't heard too much about that. We've kind of dealing with the after effects of the pandemic, kids not being around their friends and all the things that we've been talking about. And, I realize it's changed their lives. It kind of takes a lot to get back to normal again after things not being right for a long time. So where are we at now? During the budget process, I know Dr. Bolson was here, and it seemed like there was I guess an idea that we were going to, you have the Title I schools, we were going to then go to the priority schools. That was the next step up. And then I guess from there, we'll hit all the other populations in the rest of the rest of Harford County. So, where is that, and, where do you see this going in the future? I mean, there's many different reasons for, they just hit on another one, and then we have the mental illness, we have all these things going on, and it all initiates,
Well, so I'll go back in time to the funding that you spoke of. That was actually a response to the Safe to Learn Act of 2018 with school shooting violence. That actually, out of that came Ms. Alton's position, which was mandated statewide, and then you all had provided us finances to hire school psychologists. So again, a great big thank you to you all. Since then, we have continued to hire social workers, counselors, psychologists, and one of the things that is not represented in our operating budget is the fact that we're getting money through community schools and a Maryland Leads grant, which is adding positions such as social workers, behavior intervention coaches, psychologists. So when I started here, we may have had 5 social workers. We're up to 18 now. Is that right? Yeah. And we also had a couple schools that had a counselor part-time, and then that counselor would be at 2 different schools during the week, and we have, every school has their own school counselor, every school has their own school nurse, and obviously some schools have 3, 4, 5 school counselors. So again, we always could use more hands, but I definitely feel like we have some great professionals. We have over 250 student services staff out in our buildings that are providing these mental health services to our students, ranging again from our nurses to our PPWs to our psychologists, social workers, and counselors, and our special educators. That is a big piece of this puzzle as well that oftentimes gets overlooked, is those relationships that our special educators develop with students, sometimes who are working with one-on-one, sometimes working on in small groups. That goes a really long way, because it's that relationship that will help those students trust that adult and tell them things to get the intervention they need prior to needing a larger scale intervention. So to your question, Mr. Schroeds, I definitely am grateful at the support we've received through you all and Mr. Glassman and Dr. Bolson over the last few years. But again, we always can use more hands.
And as a follow-up, how many student clients, are handled, let's just say on average a week, but then how many total cases on average? Was kind of different. I see the numbers up there with, suicidal, that, but, that's not everybody. People go to the counselor, they need something, or they're stressed out, they have a bad day, whatever, and then, it just might be a one-time thing, but then there's others that I'm sure they work with, and there may even be, I guess they work with other social workers and psychologists outside of the school. Like they may have another one, so they kind of, I guess, communicate back and forth. How does that?
Yeah, that's a hard number to come up with, because we have our students going across different avenues. So a lot of our students go to the nurse because of a stomach ache, and the nurse knows it's not your stomach, that you're anxious. So they're seeing that child for a mental health concern. And you're right, we have school counselors who see students one time and never have to work with them again. Other times they may meet with the same child for 15 minutes every day. So it's hard to say how many students get seen. I would hope that all of our students are being seen by one of those professionals, even if it's just for a classroom guidance lesson, whether it's for career exploration, college planning, things of those nature. So it's hard to say, because we could have a student come down who wants to talk about college, and 10 minutes in the conversation it turns more into mental health concerns.
And are there peer counselors in the schools where students kind of, they may designate, there's different jobs sometimes students have, or clubs, or different things. Do you have that? I remember that there was peer counselors back in the day, and sometimes it may just be another student that could sometimes work with students that might be having trouble and saying, it'll be okay, and just kind of help them out. Do we have any programs? And
Not in an official capacity. I'm sure those conversations happen just by good friendships, but no, we do not have an official peer counselor program.
We do have student groups that are focused
Right.
on mental health. And I think that those groups sometimes become places where peers, because they have a common interest in mental health.
Right.
So there are some groups, there's one called Our Mind Matters that are in some of our schools. Friends or Family is another one that are in several of our schools. We have a student mental health council, and they do come together, but as far as an official program, no. And I do want to say our school counseling offices are some of the busiest places in our buildings. I was in a building, and I saw the traffic that went in and out. But that's also why our community partnerships are so important, because our professionals in our buildings are very busy. But as you said, we also have students who are seeing people outside of our schools. That's why we have school-based mental health. That's part of my job, to learn about the resources that are available and share those with school-based staff so that they can share those with families. There's a lot of coordination that goes on throughout the day.
Right. Yeah, I know a similar model, outside of schools, but you have peer recovery coaches, like when you talk about addiction and things like that, where that's really what helps them out, because they were there. They experienced certain things, and they know how to, talk people
They
through
do.
things.
It's very powerful.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeds. Anyone else? Thank you for your presentation. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, if I may, I'm going to go back to agenda number 4, presentation of proclamations. We have none. And then I would be remiss if I didn't recognize Delegate McComas is in the house with us tonight. Ms. McComas. Ms. Pekovic. Ms. Pekovic. Agenda item number 7, approval of minutes. Public hearing, April 19th, 2022. Legislative day 22-013, April 21st, 2022. Are there any corrections to the minutes? There being no corrections, the minutes stand approved. Agenda item number 8, introduction and consideration of resolutions. Mr. Wagner, please read bills 22-011 through 22-013 into the record for introduction.
Which is under agenda item number 9. I believe that the
Resolutions.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Correct. So introduction of bills, yes.
Bill number 22-0011, zoning definitions, Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Program. An act to add the definitions of abatement, agricultural best management practice, aquaculture, boathouse, borrow pit, buffer management plan, canopy tree, comar, conforming, conservation easement, cover crop, critical area buffer yard, critical area grandfathered parcel or lot, developed woodlands, disturbance, documented breeding bird areas, establishment, financial assurance, fisheries activities, forest management, forest practice, fully established, growth allocation envelope, habitat protection plan, hazardous tree, in-kind replacement, land clearing, landward edge, large shrub, limit of disturbance, living shoreline, local significance, lot coverage, critical area, minerals, modified buffer area, MBA, natural parks, natural vegetation, nature-dominated new development, non-water dependent project, offsets, permanent disturbance, plant habitat, port, program amendment, program refinement, redevelopment, critical area, restoration, riparian habitat, shore erosion protection, works, shore protection works, small shrub, soil conservation and water quality plans, species endangered, species in need of conservation, species invasive, species threatened, spoil pile, steep slopes, critical area, structure critical area, substantial alterations, surface mining, temporary disturbance, thinning, transportation facilities, understory tree, upland boundary, vessel, water-dependent facilities, waterfowl, water use industry, and wildlife habitat to Section 267-4, definitions to delete the definitions of buffer exempt area and threatened or endangered species or species in need of conservation in Section 267-4 definitions, and to repeal and reenact with amendments the definitions of anadromous fish, propagation, waters, colonial nesting, water birds, critical area buffer, development activities, forest, growth allocation, habitat protection area, intensely developed areas, limited development areas, mean high waterline, natural heritage area, natural regeneration, non-tidal wetlands, overburden storage or disposal, peer, community, project approval, reclamation, resource conservation areas, structure, tree, tributary streams, wash plant, waterfowl staging, and concentration area, and wildlife corridor in Section 267-4 definitions, all of Article 1, general provisions to repeal and reenact with amendments, subsection A of Section 267-11, variances of Article 2, administration and enforcement, and to repeal and reenact with amendments to Section 267-63, Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Overlay District of Article 7, district regulations of all of Part 1, standards of Chapter 267 zoning of the Harford County Code as amended to clarify what constitutes lot coverage in the critical area, to include charts and tables setting forth mitigation requirements in the critical area, to clarify when permit applications are permitted to be accepted and revised when a property contains a current zoning violation in the critical area, to specify what information shall be included in a zoning violation letter for property in the critical area, to add references to the critical area program manual, to increase the fee in lieu for mitigation of disturbance in the critical area, to broaden the options to utilize fee in lieu in the critical area, to expand the critical area buffer for non-tidal wetlands, to change terminology from buffer exempt area to modified buffer area in the critical area, to prohibit harvesting in the habitat protection area or the associated buffers, to clarify when a variance is acceptable to pursue and when applications will be accepted and reviewed for properties in the critical area, to allow the ability to use dredge spoils to enhance and create wetlands, a living shoreline, or replenish an eroding island in the critical area, to allow water-dependent structures and accessory structures thereon in the critical area, to create standards for distinguishing property lines that extend over the waterway in the critical area, to include protections and mitigation standards for forest and developed woodlands located in the critical area, to require shrub removals to be replaced in the critical area, to include the process by which the critical area program can be altered, refined, or amended as generally relating to the Chesapeake Bay critical area. And I do not believe I have a date and time for the public hearing. Yes, I do. By the council, May 3rd, 2022, introduced, read first time, order posted, public hearing scheduled June 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Bill number 22-012, introduced by Council President Vincenti at the request of the county executive, an act to repeal and reenact with amendments sections A1 Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Management subsection A in parentheses 1 Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Management Program of section 169-1. Adoption, legal status of Chapter 169, Master Plan of the Harford County Code as amended to adopt the Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Program, including the zoning code regulations, critical area maps, and the critical area manual as part of the official Harford County Master Plan. By the council, May 3rd, 2022, introduced, read first time, order posted, and public hearing scheduled on June 7th, 2022. Bill number 22-013, introduced by Council President Vincenti at the request of the county executive, an act to repeal and reenact with amendments section 268-10 Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Overlay District of Article 3, requirements for the development of land of Chapter 268 subdivision regulations of the Harford County Code as amended to change the name of the Critical Area Program and generally relating to the Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Program. By the council, May 3rd, 2022, introduced, read first time, order posted, and public hearing scheduled on June 7, 2022 at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Councilman Wagner. Agenda item number 10, introduction and consideration of amendments. We have none. 11, call for final reading of bills. Bill 22-005, Charter Amendment, non-interference with the executive branch. May I have a motion?
I would move for the approval of bill number 22-005.
May I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Giangiordano. It's moved and seconded to approve Bill 22-005. Any comments? Mr. Wagner?
I just appreciate those that will support it this evening. I believe it was a necessary inclusion that we did that, and let the voters decide what they want to do with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Ms. Dixon?
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Giangiordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeds? Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
There being 7 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, Bill 22-005 is hereby approved. Agenda item number 12, enrollment of bills. Bill 22-005, Charter Amendment, non-interference with the executive branch, is certified as being the text finally passed. 13, unfinished business, there is none. 14, new business. Annual adequate public facilities report, provide an annual report. So, Council, as you know, in your pamphlet, in your books, you have a summary of the Adequate Public Facilities Advisory Board meeting. We met last December. As I said earlier tonight, our student enrollment is up over 594 students, pushing 38,000. We still have a moratorium on certain schools, Bel Air, Harvard Grace, Homestead, Wakefield, and Red Pump Elementary. Recently, we had a meeting to assist with the town of Bel Air. Councilman Jan Giordano and myself had a meeting with the town of Bel Air and Harford County Public Schools to assist in some of the issues that they had with the replacement of Homestead Wakefield. We are trying to schedule a second meeting now, which will probably happen one day next week, to see if we can't assist in that a little further. I got a call from Mayor Bianca today, and Ms. Harris is putting that meeting together. But basically, all the other information is in your packet. Also, in the past, we considered a summer schedule for council meetings. It's been proposed to recess during July and August and resume regular scheduled meetings in September 6th. So with that, I would need a motion to move forward. May I have a motion? Anyone? Mr. Schroeds?
Council President, I make a motion to adopt the 2023 council meeting summer schedule. It says 2020, it says it wrong here, it's 2022.
Yeah. Okay. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jan Giordano. It's moved and seconded to approve the council meeting summer schedule. Any comments? Seeing none, Ms. Dixon.
Mr. President?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Jan Giordano?
Aye.
Mr. Schroeds? Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Beulah?
Aye.
There being 7 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, the council summer schedule is hereby approved. Section C, Executive Order 22-03, Harford County African American Heritage Grant. Mr. Wagner.
Executive Order 22-03, Harford County African American Heritage Grant, whereas preserving, researching, and interpreting African American culture and heritage is essential to the understanding of our nation's history, whereas African American culture and heritage have often been excluded from the preservation, research, and interpretation of our nation's past, whereas African Americans have made significant contributions to Harford County from before its founding to the present day, and whereas Harford County is committed to supporting the efforts of preservation and protection of the African American cultural and historical resources throughout the county. Now therefore, Section 1, be it ordered by the County Executive of Harford County, Maryland, that a grant program to assist in the funding of preservation, research, and interpretation of African American culture and heritage in Harford County shall be established. Section 2, be it further ordered that the grant program shall be entitled the Harford County African American Heritage Grant. Section 3, be it further ordered that this executive order shall take place on the 1st of July, 2022, and shall remain in effect until further notice. In witness whereof, I have I've set my hand and caused the great seal of Harford County to be affixed this 17th day of April, 2022, signed by Barry Glassman, with Tisha Wright as attesting to that.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Agenda item 15, we'll skip for a minute. Agenda item 16, business from council members. Mr. Beulah, we'll start on your end.
I have no comments tonight, Council President. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Beulah. Mr. Wagner.
I just want to point out that I don't think we had brought this up at the last meeting, because I'm not so sure we had the details, but certainly Patricia Barth passed away, and she was a long-standing Harford County employee working in planning and zoning for many, many years. I know Councilman Schroeds worked with her over there, and I dealt with her for a lot of years too, and she was certainly a good woman, part of the Friends of Harford, and very concerned about Harford's future and its heritage as well. Second Saturdays is coming May the 14th to Aberdeen's Festival Park. They will have a farmer's market, music, crafts. When it gets dark, they're going to have a movie night there, and that is on May the 14th. Bring the family, come on out. It's from 3 to 7 p.m. in Aberdeen Festival Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Mr. Schroeds.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to congratulate the Jarrodsville Lions Club on a very successful car show, Romancing of the Chrome, just a little while ago. And also myself and Councilman Jan Giordano attended the Bel Air Volunteer Fire Banquet. I know that he'll say more about that, but I do want to congratulate Eddie Hopkins. He received an award. He has put in over 20,000 hours of service, so I wanted to highlight that, but there were also an individual that served 65 years and another one that served 50 years in the Bel Air Volunteer Fire Company. And, we're in town a lot, and I can't tell you how many times the calls and the call volume that they receive here at their fire department, but it's just incredible. And I know Tony, again, will hit on that. Thanks for saying those words about Pat Barth. She was my first supervisor when I worked in Harford County, and I learned a lot from her. And, my condolences to her family. Also, there was an event over the weekend, Sun Shines Angels, and I just want to thank them for the great work that they're doing. It's a great nonprofit, and encourage you to get involved with that. That's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeds. Mr. Jan Giordano.
Thank you, Council President. As Councilman Schroed said, I attended the Bel Air Volunteer Fire Banquet this Saturday. Want to congratulate all the award recipients. Eddie Hopkins did have 20,000 calls, and I think most people don't realize everything's volunteer, and the reason they get such high call volume is because of the amount of calls that they get in Bel Air. I did talk to a bunch of young firefighters, probably mid-20s. A lot of them become career firefighters. A couple of them actually one is in Montgomery County, the other one is in Virginia, but they still live in Harford County. They don't want to leave Harford County. They'd love to stay in Harford County. And I think we need to look at doing something for our firefighters so that we can keep the volunteer system that we have, and that's something I think we need to look further, and maybe it's a tax break on housing or something. They stated to me that's the most difficult thing for them to do is find housing, and especially for the firefighters in and around Bel Air. They just can't afford to stay in and around Bel Air. So it was good to go. It was good to talk to the young guys to find out, hey, what's going on? If you don't talk to them, you don't know. So I really want to say congratulations and thank you to all the volunteer fire department. This evening before tonight, I was at the Harford County Sheriff Awards, so I want to congratulate Valor Commendation to Sergeant Brandon Underhill, Corporal Alan Frederick Jr., Senior Deputy Jeremy Mothershed, Deputy First Class Cameron Burns, Deputy First Class Tyre Dinion, and the Deputy of the Year is Senior Deputy Thomas J. Jackson V, and Correctional Officer of the Year is Senior Deputy Ryan Shaw. So I want to give a big shout out and congratulations to them. And finally, First Friday in Bel Air is this week. If you have a chance, attend. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, just wanted to remind everyone that the Folsom Volunteer Fire Ambulance Company on Carsmill Road is starting up their food truck Thursday again. So as a fundraiser for the firehouse, food trucks will be at the firehouse every Thursday, starting at 4:30, running until 8:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to say happy Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It's a mouthful. And also, I want to give a shout out to a dear friend of mine that passed away. He had a rare form of cancer, Jerome Presbury, that passed away about a week ago. So rest in peace. And with that, Council President, I'll yield my time back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
I have one. Councilman Tony G. reminded me, First Fridays in Havre de Grace this Friday. It's always a good time there. So, no, you did First Fridays in Bel Air. I forgot.
You missed your turn. That doesn't count.
Don't make me go back when you know. So I just want to remind that it's always a good time in Havre de Grace, and just had a brain cramp there because I meant to mention that. So First Fridays in Bel Air. I mean, Havre de Grace.
That's two. Jeez.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Beulah. Back to 15, business from the president. I want to remind everyone that our public hearings for the budget are tomorrow evening here in the chambers at 7 p.m. and then also on May 11th at 7 p.m. And along with that, I know we still have time to do it, but I want to take a minute to thank our Citizen Budget Advisory Board for sitting the past week, 4 long days, working through each department and looking at their budgets. And I want to give a special thanks to my budget advisor and chair of the board, Andrew Ondish. Also, this past weekend, there were many events in Havre de Grace, very successful events, one being the 40th anniversary of the Havre de Grace Decoy Show. And what was really unique was we were able to go back to the original venue where we held our first show at the Havre de Grace High School Gymnasium. And it was very well attended. I was surprised that we had that many people in, but it was a good event. And then I want to congratulate the Harford County Sheriff's Office Training Academy for graduating 8 more new deputies for the detention side or the correction side. So with that, I will finish, and then agenda number 17, comments and input from attending citizens. Ms. Dixon, do we have anyone signed up?
Yes, Mr. President, we have 14 this evening.
Again, I will remind everyone that 3 minutes apiece, be respectful of each other, and we'll move forward. Call your first speaker.
John Malamo, followed by Francis Grambo.
Good evening, sir.
To you and your colleagues. A few thoughts on the situation surrounding Bill 22-3. Perryman residents are predictably happy. They get a study group and a legally defined moratorium on construction of new industrial and commercial buildings. Building permits cannot be issued and site plans cannot be approved. The language does not include stormwater management plans or grading permits. May these plans be approved, permits issued, and work commenced? A question for the courts. Developer predictably unhappy. They state that they are considering legal action. They are burdened to overcome 3 rulings from Maryland case law. 1, Maryland is a late vesting state. Project is not vested until there is visible construction. A project not vested has no right to continue regardless of how much money has been spent on plans or drawings. 2, an unconstitutional taking does not occur unless a property owner is deprived of all economically beneficial use. 3, no one is entitled to zoning. Zoning may change at any time. In this case, without vesting, a code change restricting development might be inconvenient but would not be illegal. Those rulings should sound familiar. They are from Maryland Reclamation Associates versus Harford County, one of County Executive Glassman's adventures. No vested project, no land ownership, no zoning entitlement, questionable standing. What legal action is available? The County Council appears to support the Perryman Peninsula moratorium while simultaneously supporting the developer with Amendment 13, effectively straddling both sides of the issue. Could that boost the council's standing? Amendment to 13 to the bill allows continued processing of plans from Craig and any other previously submitted plan short of approval, which makes no sense at all when recommendations from the study group could change code requirements. How exactly does that work? Makes perfect sense when you consider this. Land Use Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, Title 7, Subtitle 3, Development Rights and Responsibilities Agreements. These agreements effectively stay all local laws, rules, regulation, and policies governing the use, density, or intensity of real property to those at the time the agreement is made. Development then proceeds within the existing laws. Is this a backdoor to development rights and responsibilities agreements? The county administration, they lose either way. If they approve the moratorium, developers are not happy. If they disapprove, residents already fed up with the county's development model are not happy. Ironic that then Councilman, now County Executive Barry Glassman, while sitting on the council, voted for legislation to stop development and protect the Gravel Hill community. Then voted for legislation to support development that likely will destroy the Perryman community, and apparently opposes legislation that may protect Perryman. Odd. Please, no more of the same on that track. What exactly does a moratorium provide the residents of Perryman Peninsula and Harford County? Who gets what? Please do get back to me on that. Good night.
Mr. Grambo, before you start, sir? Sir? Can you find a seat, please? Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. Francis Grambo, Forest Hill, Maryland. I want to say something about Perryman, but first, having been the Board of Education president and sitting here and watching that tonight, I found it very odd that they came in here with the suicide ideations report and then told you that that data really doesn't mean anything because it includes data from all over the spectrum. But they have the data from all over the spectrum, but they didn't bring it. Why not? I know Councilman Wagner was asking for it. He was correct to do that. It's unfortunate that they bamboozled all of us like that. That's quite a lot of money that was in this room that really didn't speak to anything. I did think it was interesting, too, that they talked about the students only being in school for 1/8 of the time of the year, but they get 57% of the county's budget. The other thing that I thought was very interesting about their comments was that they're wondering why mental health is an issue. Well, when you spend all this time trying to rip the kids away from their parents and teach them things that they don't want taught at home, you get problems. We saw that tonight. It's pretty unfortunate. So I thank you for bringing them out here. I wish they would have done their job a little better. And the only other thing I wanted to say about Perryman real fast, I read Barry Glassman's note, and he found his Constitution because he mentioned it, which I thought was pretty funny, because he sure didn't know where it was when we were locked down and when we had all the other things going on. So congratulations, Barry, for finding your Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Kate McDonald, followed by Michelle Willoughby.
Thank you, ma'am. Want to call your next speaker?
Michelle Willoughby, followed by Justin Pickering.
Good evening, Michelle, Jarrodsville, Maryland, Michelle Willoughby, I'm sorry. So we sat and watched this dog and pony show through the Board of Education, what they tried to present this evening. And there's some very direct questions that I would hope maybe you guys could ask them next time. Like, how many of these counseling sessions are kept from the parents? How many kids are told not to tell their parents what's discussed? As far as I remember, I'm the parent, and their mental health ultimately is up to me to take care of. And if I need help, I reach out and I ask for it for my kid. I don't know when it became the school's position to take away parenting and keep information from me. Rest assured, they are keeping information, and they are telling children not to tell their parents when they decide they want to change their sexual identity in school or their name. They're lying. Also, they lied about the health curriculum. The board, Maryland State Board, Department of Education already has their outline. They are very well aware of what the outline is. It's pretty disgusting. And I just find it a shame that they preach transparency, but there's absolutely none. It's word salad. I encourage you guys, maybe if you're not able to just walk across the hall and get certain information, file public information acts. Ask pointed questions and ask for these, the things that we've been telling you about for the last 2 years. File a Freedom Information Act. Read it for yourself. See how they're lying to us, everybody in the audience, everybody on the air, and you guys. And I think that you'll find yourself pretty disgusted and pretty ticked off. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Paul Falaci, followed by I had Justine Pickering, followed by,
They left.
okay. Lauren Anderson, followed by Stacy Stone.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ron Stuczynski, followed by Chuck Mizan. Ken Shannon, followed by Bill Martino.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Bill Martino, address on file. Nations that have embraced lies and fake indoctrination have contributed to their own destruction. The prophet Isaiah tells us, "Woe to those who call evil good, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and then clever in their own sight. Woe to those who take away the rights of the ones who are in the right." When Isaiah wrote this nearly 3,000 years ago, it sounds like he was prophesizing about the 2022 Dr. Bolson-led Board of Education. The board, directed by Dr. Bolson, has led our children into darkness. Apparently, it is so dark, parents are not allowed to know about it, for they feel it may shine light on it and expose their evil. Harford County Public Schools are engaging in immoral grooming, schooling, and indoctrination of our children. You need parental permission to take the children to the planetarium or have them eat cupcakes for a birthday. However, no parental consent is required to teach them about gender transitions, gender fluidity, variations of critical race theory, and highly sexualized material. They go through great lengths to hide this from the parents. The recent day of silence in Harford County Public Schools is one such example. Nobody is allowed to communicate with each other. How are the students learning anything? This is what you get when you acquire superintendent of our school system from Washington, D.C. We allowed the nasty sewage from the swamp to travel far enough north that it ended up in Harford County. The school system is pushing for a curriculum that grooms the students to change their name, change their gender pronoun, change the restroom and locker rooms they use, change sports, and modified sleeping arrangements on overnight field trips, all without the parents' knowledge. The Gospel of John tells us, "For everyone who does evil hate the light and does not come to the light in fear the deeds will be exposed." I call on the teachers of Harford County to follow the commands of Ephesians. Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead expose them. Nearly 350 people showed up at the Jarrodsville Gardens for the Meet the Candidates event. It was clear from the audience and the candidates, Harford Countyans are very upset with the direction of the school system. It's time for new leadership and a new Board of Education. Thank you.
John Carroll, followed by Emma Peller.
Why are they allowed to clap but we weren't? By the way, gentlemen.
Ma'am, you're out of order. Just go ahead and head out.
I'm leaving.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you.
You next, not a set of balls in the room.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
John Carl, my address is on file. I think over the last 2 years, the level of angst that we've all been put under has not helped with the mental conditions of all the citizens of Harford County. And that was because the authority that you people were given against the state and federal overreach was not used, and it should have been. So I think that, like Bill said, the amount of people came out last week is people really looking deep into their politicians and the doors that they have open, the back doors. And I think there's a solution to this Perryman solution. I think it's going to take a lot of hard work, but I think the state and Harford County money and even private money, whatever it takes to buy that property, because it's not just about one person's property rights. It's about hundreds and hundreds. The biggest investment people have in their life is usually their home. And if that deal goes through, it heard the train. Anyways, if that deal is allowed to go through, then these people's lifetime investment, sometimes generations, is gone. And that needs to be addressed very seriously. I know there's a lot of talk, but it's got to be more than talk, and there's got to be some type of resolution to that. Because I went to Harford Tech, and I used to run around down there all the time. And my first plumbing job I worked for a gentleman who lived down there. And I think a lot of the county's been overdeveloped, and that could be one little last bastion of a park down there. And I think that needs to be approached very seriously. And I hope and pray that you guys would do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more speakers, Mr. President.
Before I adjourn the meeting, I will say, I was reminded by Ms. Peters in the audience that this Sunday is Mother's Day. So I would be in hot water if I didn't wish everyone a happy Mother's Day. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.